Alright, so now I'm going to have to play the next part. Now, the part that I wanted you to hear about that was simply about the breath. About the kid takes the breath, the old man takes the breath, something like that they were talking about. That's all important, and I'm going to explain to you why in a second. Now, I don't have my keys to have it play out the thing, so hopefully you can hear it fine. But here we go.
His only physical salvation is to get back to nature. Chapter 4 of the Hindu Yogi Science of Breath by William Walker Atkinson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Esoteric Theory of Breath. The science of breath, like many other teachings, has its esoteric or inner phase, as well as its exoteric or external. The physiological phase may be termed the outer or exoteric side of the subject, and the phase which we will now consider may be termed its esoteric or inner side. Occultists in all ages and lands have always taught, usually secretly to a few followers, that there was to be found in the air a substance or principle from which all activity, vitality, and life was derived. They differed in their terms and names for this force, as well as in the details of the theory. But the main principle is to be found in all occult teachings and philosophies, and has for centuries formed a portion of the teachings of the Oriental yogis. In order to avoid misconceptions arising from the various theories regarding this great principle, which theories are usually attached to some name given the principle, we, in this work, will speak of the principle as prana, this word being the Sanskrit term meaning absolute energy. Many occult authorities teach that the principle which the Hindus term prana is the universal principle of energy or force, and that all energy or force is derived from that principle, or rather, is a particular form of manifestation of that principle. These theories do not concern us in the consideration of the subject matter of this work, and we will therefore confine ourselves to an understanding of prana as the principle of energy exhibited in all living things, which distinguishes them from a lifeless thing. We may consider it as the active principle of life, vital force, if you please. It is found in all forms of life, from the amoeba to man, from the most elementary form of plant life to the highest form of animal life. Prana is all-pervading. It is found in all things having life, and as the occult philosophy teaches that life is in all things, in every atom, the apparent lifelessness of some things being only a lesser degree of manifestation, we may understand their teachings that prana is everywhere, in everything. Prana must not be confounded with the ego, that bit of divine spirit in every soul, around which clusters matter and energy. Prana is merely a form of energy used by the ego in its material manifestation. When the ego leaves the body, the prana, being no longer under its control, responds only to the orders of the individual atoms, or groups of atoms, forming the body, and as the body disintegrates and is resolved to its original elements, each atom takes with it sufficient prana to enable it to form new combinations. The unused prana return into the great universal storehouse from which it came. With the ego in control, cohesion exists and the atoms are held together by the will of the ego. Prana is the name by which we designate a universal principle, which principle is the essence of all motion, force, or energy, whether manifested in gravitation, electricity, the revolution of the planets, and all forms of life from the highest to the lowest. It may be called the soul of force and energy in all their forms, and that principle which, operating in a certain way, causes that form of activity which accompanies life. This great principle is in all forms of matter, and yet it is not matter. It is in the air, but it is not the air nor one of its chemical constituents. Animal and plant life breathe it in the air, and yet if the air contained it not, they would die even though they might be filled with air. It is taken up by the system along with the oxygen, and yet it is not the oxygen. The Hebrew writer of the book of Genesis knew the difference between the atmospheric air and the mysterious and potent principle contained within it. He speaks of Neshamet, Rock Shaheen, which translated means the breath of the spirit of life. In the Hebrew, Neshamet means the ordinary breath of atmospheric air, and Shaheen means life or lives, while the word Ruach means the spirit of life. which occultists claim is the same principle which we speak of as prana. Prana is in the atmospheric air, but it is also elsewhere, and it penetrates where the air cannot reach. The oxygen in the air plays an important part in sustaining animal life, and the carbon plays a similar part with plant life. But prana has its own distinct part to play in the manifestation of life, aside from the physiological functions. We are constantly inhaling the air charged with prana, and are as constantly extracting the latter from the air and appropriating it to our uses. Prana is found in its freest state in the atmospheric air, which when fresh is fairly charged with it, and we draw it to us more easily from the air than from any other source. In ordinary breathing, we absorb and extract a normal supply of prana, but by controlled and regulated breathing, generally known as yogi breathing, we are enabled to extract a greater supply, which is stored away in the brain and nerve centers to be used when necessary. We may store away prana, just as a storage battery stores away electricity.
Alright, I think that's going to be enough for now. A lot to unpack there, and obviously not enough time to do it. So before I begin, breath, air, okay? In astrology terms, as how I interpret it, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I'm not trying to go against any astrologers, but when I study the breath, when I study the air, there's that fifth point of the pentagram that is spirit, okay? And we have air, and then we have spirit. We have 3 elements for air, we have 2 for water, okay? Water and air are the opposites of each other that are very much similar and the same. And I've given the distinction with fish. If a fish comes out of water, he basically chokes and drowns and is suffocating. Whereas if we go in the water, we can't extract the air out of the water, therefore we choke and die. So what water is to us in a big body of water is the same to fish in air. Therefore, this is how they're alike, this is how they're the same, but different at the same time. Sorry, my daughter wants some icing. And this is probably why there's three elements there. There's Saturn, there's Mercury, and there's the Sun. And to me, this makes sense because we've got the negative and the positive of of air itself, and then we have spirit there. And I think between the three, kind of figured out if water has 2. Anyways, that's just a little fruit for thought. I can go deeper into that, but I don't want to confuse what else I want to say, and I don't want to forget what I want to say. So, when he's talking about prana, bringing in your body, chi, ki, that life force energy, this is why if you can concentrate your mind, because like I said before, when I started meditating, I wasn't able to meditate until I learned how to breathe and calm my mind. And then once I could breathe and calm my mind, then now I can meditate. It's a progression thing. And what you have to do when you start meditating, the first things you start doing is focusing on one thing once you can. I couldn't do that at all, period. But once I was able to do, your mind wants to wander off, and you're training your mind to stay on the one thing that you want it to stay on. Some people say take everything out of your mind, and then technically you're focusing on one thing, and that is to have nothing in your mind. But that one thing is very hard. I find it easier to point your mind out a direction. But anyways, nonetheless, once you do that, because then, and maybe this, and it depends on you and how you work, because the microcosmic orbit, the one that's on my playlist, people seem to enjoy, and I use still to this day, is a good way to keep your mind focused on something while breathing. You can breathe and listen along and visualize along while you're focused on your breathing, and eventually you keep going with the rhythm, the rhythmic breathing, and yet you're still visualizing at the same time, which is kind of cool. And this is a good way. And the reason why you want to do this to meditate, when you want to focus on one thing at a time, is because your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight one, wants you to do a lot of things all at once. It really wants you to do all those things all at one time because there's something imminent's attacking you, so you gotta get things done as fast as possible. So if you gotta do one fucking thing at a time, it's gonna take forever, right? So this is why people try to multitask all day long and they never get further ahead, and it gets them more and more in fear and despair and pissed off and upset that they can't get these things done because they're trying to get too many things done at once. If you just focus on one thing at a fucking time, things start clicking. You do one thing and you can do the next thing better, and then sometimes you don't even have to do the last 2 things. or sometimes it just end up working out for you. But nonetheless, when he's talking about prana, when he's talking about bringing it in, it's in air, but yet we can't see it. But it's in there. It's part of our soul. I don't know if you want to think of prana as the soul or not, because air is definitely not our soul, but the element of air, like where you think about wind moving the molecules around, might be a little different than it's definitely different than the prana that's in the air, but we breathe it in. I think that's the reason why water we can't. Food is something we can go a long enough time without. And I think eventually you can train your body to go without it. Period. But air you can't go without. Period. And there's a reason for that, and I think it's because of the prana, because of the stuff that's in it. Because you need to keep re-energizing your body with both oxygen to your cells and prana. And the prana is that life force, energy that we need to breathe into us. As he just explained, your ego. And what they mean by ego, they don't mean they don't necessarily mean the ego as in the one that people are hating on all the time. I think they mean as ego as in your personality, but I could be wrong. It could be just the ego. But because he says when the ego leaves the body, basically when you die, whoever you are, me as an example, Cory LeBlanc dies. Well then, the prana stays with the atoms for a little while, and they regroup, and then it goes elsewhere to make up a new body or whatever the case was. But nonetheless, the prana that's in the air is uber important. And you don't need to know all this to learn how to do breathing techniques, but this is why there's healing involved in this stuff, because you are bringing in extra air, and it doesn't matter if you want to think about it as you're just oxygenating your body better, if you're removing carbon dioxide better. I don't care how you look at it, but just you need to start doing this shit, because this is healing magic on its own. The states of consciousness and the fact that you can get in these altered states are going to be so beneficial beyond belief that you won't even be able to comprehend it. And in all honesty, these are one of these things that it's not like you start doing ritual magic and you're trying to manifest something. You start doing sigils, you want to manifest something. Depending on your makeup, some things might happen fast, some things may not. But for the most part, it's going to take a little bit of time, especially in the beginning. I come out here and I say these things work for me, these things work for me. But I don't really take into account that I did the neophyte twice. Before that, I was like 6 months in just New Age, and now I'm like a year and a half past the first 2 fucking years I did of the fucking first grade. So, something to that effect anyways. It's like almost 4 years now. It's getting close to the 4-year mark. But point is, I spent a lot of time to get to this point. So I always think that the things I'm doing now that just come easy is going to come easy for everybody. And, High Percentage Magic had a few new videos, and I listened to one, and he kind of made me realize that I might be saying things. Now, the reject, banish, deny, I know works right off the hop, right as soon as you do it. It's the first line of defense. It's the first thing you should be fucking doing, regardless of your background. Because Christians have one as well. It's get behind me, Satan. Because after all, Satan does mean adversary, But anyways, get behind me, Satan, meaning, I reject what you're fucking saying. Satan's in front of you trying to fucking tempt you. Get the fuck behind me, basically. But it's the same concept. There's so many of these different ones that in different religions that you can draw from depending on what your belief is. So you don't have to necessarily do the way I do it. But doing that daily temple work and getting the archangels on my side and quietening my mind and managing myself and doing these things over and over and over and over and over again, and fine-tuning them and writing my diary and doing the dream work and the shadow work and all this, it gets your energy going. And now with the microcosmic orbit that I do every fucking day is really great, because when he's talking about storing prana, that's what it is. Because without the microcosmic orbit, you can still store prana. You can definitely still store prana, but you're definitely not utilizing it. You're not letting it flow. You're not using it to your benefit. And this is the energy that protects you. This is the energy that you send out when you start making and doing magic and or thought forms and or anything. This energy helps you out. And I don't know if you want to think of this as prana or just another source. I tend to think of it as prana, because to me, prana is not positive or negative. There's positive ions, there's negative ions. Photosynthesis is not necessarily photo as in a picture, even though it's part of it, but it's photon, right? A photon of light comes to that fucking leaf and with the water, it creates is it carbon dioxide? Anyways, point is that's what creates the food inside the fucking plant for the cow to eat, and it becomes a carbohydrate, and then we eat the cow and whatever else. But I'm way off topic here, but I wanted you to hear those things because the beginning part is important, about the baby takes its first breath and the old man dies, taking his last breath. He tries to get enough air, he can't get in him. And I think those things are important because of some of the words I'm going to give you, some of the language from the Latin to the Greek to today's words, and how they're all interconnected. Same thing with the ruach. That's involved in this as well when you look at different meanings of spirit. Because once again, breath, the Latin word, well, the root Latin word is spir, S-P-I-R, and spiritus also means breath. Now, all these are derivatives and come from respiration, expire, which is a funny thing because your respiratory system. Anyways, I'm gonna take out my phone. I'm gonna do all those. I'm pretty sure I'm probably over time for the one video already, so maybe I'll just start reading them in case I do have time to just get all this out. But let me just read some of these fuckers to you, so you can get a little base, and then the next video I can talk about it, I guess. But this is very important, knowing etymology of things. Okay, so spir and spiritus. Okay, well that's not where I want to start actually. Okay, the sevenfold mysteries. Alright, well, she's in here somewhere, so. Alright, spir or spiritus. Wind, spirit, breath, person, animation, sigh. The Latin root word spir means breath. The root word is the word's origin of a fair number of English vocabulary words, including inspire, respiration, and expire. So you get inspired, respiration, and then you expire. The Latin root word for spire means breath. The root word origins is a fair number of English includes inspire, respiration, and expire. The root spire is easily recalled via the word perspiration. That is the sweat in the act of breathing through your pores of your skin. Hear that? Breathing through the pores of your skin. And oh shit. In the initiation into hermetics, I said this many times. You can shower, keep showering. Showering is good. Cleanliness is good. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Maybe don't do it too much, and definitely don't be killing all the germs all the time. But wash yourself down, get the dirt off of you. You know what I mean? But what we're supposed to do every day, what people are supposed to do every day, which helps for keeping your skin younger, for helping your skin breathe, all of the above. Okay, is rubbing your skin with a rag everywhere, all over your body until it's pink. You got to get the dead layer of skin off of your arms, off of your legs, off of your skin, okay? Because your skin's an organ. So if you leave dead skin on there and you try to revive it, you're going to have problems. Like every other organ in your body, it keeps growing, and then the outer layer dies off, and then it goes wherever it goes, and then there's a new layer built. This is how we are. This is one of the reasons I believe in reincarnation, because our body can keep regenerating. This is one of these processes that you got to take control of, because if you're doing it on the outside, then it's going to happen on the inside better. Okay, as within, so without. So you want to show your insides that you want to last longer. You start doing this on the outside, and more than that, by doing that, later on in initiation in hermetics, you can start learning how to actually breathe through your skin. And I said this before, I thought this was a bunch of fucking bullshit. And just so happened around the same time when I read that book, well, listen to it on YouTube because it's free, my son developed epilepsy. And the doctor said he's got to stay away from bodies of water in case he has a seizure. And we said, oh, okay, that makes sense. You can't breathe. I guess you don't breathe whenever you're having a seizure. And he said, well, kind of. He's like, but the real reason is you breathe through your pores of your body when you're having a seizure. Therefore, if he's in the water, he cannot breathe. He needs to be in air. Because it pulls it in, it pushes it out, pulls it in, pushes it out. And so when it goes to pull in, it's going to be water, right? It's like, holy fuck, what a fucking coincidence that was, that I found that knowledge. That floored me. It's like, wow, this is coming from a doctor. That's unbelievable. So, Also, something good to know, perspiration also comes from that. Inspire, respiration, expire, all these things. If we're not learning how to breathe through our skin, then maybe we expire sooner. If we don't learn to breathe correctly, then maybe we expire sooner. There's somewhere, I thought it was in this book, but it must be somewhere else. But another old yogi or some some other book I read somewhere, I can't remember where, but it said, what if we have only a certain amount of breaths? You know, we're having so many in these days. And they say the less breaths, the better. The less you breathe in a minute is the better for you. But what if you only have a certain amount of breath? What if there's only a certain amount of prana for you? What if there's only a certain amount of spirit? What if that's why they're putting these masks on us? What if that's why we're never taught how to breathe properly? I don't know. You can go along with that if you want. Inspiration has an unusual history in that its figurative sense appears to predate its literal one. It comes from the Latin inspiratus, the past participle of inspirare, to breathe into, inspire. To breathe into is inspire, okay? And in English has the meaning the drawing of air into the lungs. So what this is saying is the word inspire, the word inspiration. You know, that person's my inspiration. Okay, well, in its older meaning was to breathe into. That's what inspire means. Was to breathe into, and in English it has the meaning drawing. The drawing of air into the lungs is what it means in English. Inspire. So you make up your judgments about that, because I thought inspiring means, well, that person just inspired me. You know, I just got inspiration, which means to draw air into your lungs. Well, what do I keep saying? Our thoughts aren't our own. If someone gives you inspiration, and the breath, the word for breath is spiritus, right? Spirits. Well, remember a long, long time ago, if you listen to my podcast, and if you haven't, I said, you know, for the reject, banish, deny thing, maybe a good trick would be to think of every thought you have as fucking spirits, because I think they are closer to spirits. Frederick Xavier taught me that as well. And if you're starting to have a bunch of negative thoughts and you think it's pointless to banish them away, well, then think of that as some fucking dark fucking entity beside you, fucking telling you, pointing at you, you know, and you got this good entity over here trying to battle him, and you're gonna give in to this asshole. It's like, no, think of this. So our version of inspire is to breathe into our lungs. Well, what happens if, you know, and I said this before too, when you go, I was always told, and it's a superstition, but when you go by a cemetery, you hold your breath. Why the fuck would you hold your breath when you go by a cemetery? Is it because there's a bunch of dead spirits there? You don't want to breathe that shit in. You don't want to breathe in the death. You don't want to you don't want to, anyways, just some food for thought. But with every thought, because you're breathing in stuff, you don't see the fucking oxygen you're breathing in. You don't see the carbon dioxide you're breathing out. And you can say, well, prana, that sounds like a whole bunch of shit. Okay, but you can't see the other things you know you're breathing in. So why would you rule that out? And even more than that, how the fuck do you know that when you breathe in stuff, you're not breathing in what's creating these fucking thoughts up here? No one really knows where these thoughts come from. We got a whole bunch of speculation. And we can see how things work when we start elaborating on thoughts. But where does the thought initially come from? It's a good thing to think about. But yeah, so just so you know, the so to breathe into is the original version of that, and then our version is to draw, the drawing of air into lungs. And nowadays, inspire means something completely different. Mia!